the Secret Service director, which we all kind of anticipated somewhat. Kimberly Cheatle resigned this morning, saying essentially, I take full responsibility. I'm out.
That's right. So after the hearing yesterday, we saw something extremely rare out of this Congress, and that was a bipartisan letter from the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, signed by both the chairman, James Comer, and the ranking member, Jamie Raskin, two individuals in Congress that rarely agree on anything, but they sent this joint letter to the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle. And it said, on July 13th, the United States Secret Service, under your leadership, failed to protect former President Donald Trump from assassination attempt. And they go on to say, today, you failed to provide answers to basic questions regarding that stunning operational failure and to reassure the American people that the Secret Service has learned its lessons and begun to correct its systemic blunders and failures. We call on you to resign as director as a first step to allowing new leadership to swiftly address this crisis and rebuild trust of a truly concerned Congress and the American people. Now, that was kind of the sign that she won't last the week, that there was bipartisan outcry. You saw that within the hearing. There were a few members on the Democrat side that went rogue and made it about other issues. But the vast majority of congressional members in that hearing were very genuinely upset at the failures. And then this morning, we see that she tenured her resignation to the Secret Service.
Yeah, there was an email that went out to her staff that said, I take full responsibility for the security lapse. In light of recent events, it's with a heavy heart, I made the difficult decision to step down as your director. Another breaking news item is that President Joe Biden will address the nation tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's going to happen tomorrow, presumably from the White House. Is that the thought process as of now?
They are saying that President Biden is expected to travel back to D.C. after being in Delaware over the weekend where he was recovering from his COVID diagnosis, that he will be traveling back today and preparing to deliver that address tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We also have another large address tomorrow, and that's from Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who will be addressing Congress at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we are seeing many Democrats that are boycotting that address. Kamala Harris is not going to preside over the Senate as the president of the Senate, which is her official duty as vice president. For that address, she will be attending a campaign event in Indianapolis, so snubbing the prime minister there. And they are saying that she's planning on trying to meet with the prime minister later in the week, possibly Thursday. We'll see how that all pans out, if that's just maybe giving a little bit of service to the prime minister since he came all this way. But it is glaring that they are not going to be there in the room for the address to Congress.
A vice president and someone who has been in public service for quite a long time now, there's a lot you can pick apart.
Well, that's right. And if you look at even her voting record in the Senate, organizations do voting scorecards. They take your record of votes, and based on how you voted on certain bills that have hot button issues and topics, they can kind of rate you, whereas like the furthest right in the Senate and the furthest left. And she ranked further to the left in her voting record in the Senate than Bernie Sanders.
Now, I do have a question. It's something we should bring up. I'm not even sure the answer to this. If Joe Biden steps down this week, which, by the way, I'm not saying he will, but if I was a betting man, I think that you could have that happen. I think you have a very good chance that she becomes president before the election. I just think that's highly likely. I think that clearly there is something going on. We're not being shown everything right now. Whether you believe it's some sort of crazy conspiracy or not, I don't think it is. I think it is just it would make more sense. It would be a stronger incumbency for her to have those few months to become the president, show she can lead to a large percentage of people, as we saw the polls today, have a neck and neck with her and Donald Trump in terms of just the overall. But what we really saw was this was from a Quinnipiac poll, that there was a massive gap in terms of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the younger demographic pack.
That's right. So the Quinnipiac poll, which was started actually the day before President Biden resigned, it was on the 19th, but a lot of people had been, and by resigned from the ticket, not from the presidency, but a lot of people had already started doing these polls if there was a possible replacement. And we see that President Trump in the overall number led Vice President Harris 49 to 47 with a 2.8 percent margin of error. So essentially a statistical tie with the edge to President Trump. But when you dig into the analytics and the details of the poll, when you look at the 18 to 34 age demographic, so the younger voters, some of these people are able to vote for the first time into, in the middle of your career, but that's kind of the youngest age demographic that they'll look at. You see that Harris is losing by 19 points in that age demographic from it's 58 to 39.
That's gigantic.
I mean, that's way outside the margin of error. That's not the voting demographic that typically you expect to break in an extreme number for a Republican candidate, but you're seeing that here in this poll. Obviously, you have to caution these polls are very early. A lot of this data was before he even announced that he was not seeking re-election.
Some of it was, though.
Some of it was because it went through the 21st, but you do have to take that with a grain of salt. But it is that's probably a very troubling number for the people in the campaign that are starting to analyze data.
And that is why I think you push her to become the president. She can serve 2 full elected terms. So you'd have 2 terms plus 6 months, is what we're being told. Here's the deal. I truthfully believe, and I know you're going to go, this is wild, because you're the people who watch and listen to this broadcast. You are not who I'm talking about. I believe there is a large percentage of that demographic, of that age demographic, that does not know who the vice president of the United States is. So the name Kamala Harris doesn't mean anything to them. The name Donald Trump does. Donald Trump, celebrity. Donald Trump, the president. Donald Trump, probably the most controversial president of our lifetime. So yes, they know the name Donald Trump, so they'll go Donald Trump. So you actually have to do so. This is why when people have said who's going to be the vice president, they keep throwing out even like a Shapiro, which, look, I could be totally wrong. I think she has to go with someone with some name value.
Right.
That people are familiar with, because you don't have the lead time to get used to the person. There's not this. I mean, J.D. Vance, I think, is one of them. J.D. Vance, most people who are running in that circle know who he is. He's had a very successful career, whether it was his book or whatever. He had brand awareness. I don't think a Shapiro does. That's why I think you're either going to go with a Pete Buttigieg or you're going to go with the astronaut Kelly, because
Kelly, right.
That is a brand name that we all know. I really think they need it, because I don't know if Harris is carrying the weight that they think. I think you'd be shocked if you went to any city in in the country, interviewing people on the street and asked them who's the vice president of the United States. There's a large percentage that are not going to know, that are not engaged in politics the way you are. So I think that poll may be reflective of that, which is brand awareness.
Goes to your point as well of if the president were to resign before the end of his term, gives Kamala Harris the ability to then be the president, and that's earned media that you can't buy if you're running for president.
Yep.